In Daniel chapter 1, I want to begin reading in verse number 5. So far, we see that Daniel and his friends and a host of others have been deported by Nebuchadnezzar in 606 BC, the first deportation over into Babylon. And there, Nebuchadnezzar has a plan for them, and he gives directions regarding those who have been deported. Listen to what it says in verse 5 of chapter 1. And the king, talking about Nebuchadnezzar, appointed for them a daily ration from the king's choice food and from the wine which he drank, and appointed that they should be educated 3 years, and at the end of which they were to enter in to the king's personal service. Now among them from the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them, and to Daniel he assigned the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. And the commander of the officials said to Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink, for why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he says, please test your servants for 10 days, and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed in your presence and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them and in this matter and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and kept giving them vegetables. And as for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. Then at the end of the days, which the king had specified for presenting them, the commander of the officials presented them before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king talked with them, and out of them all not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's personal service. And as for every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in all his realm. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. This particular passage teaches us a great truth that we need to know or to be reaffirmed in our life. It's basically this truth that God blesses individuals who choose to be faithful to Him and to His Word. You need to write that down. God blesses individuals who choose to be faithful to Him and to His Word. I think we have forgotten that. I think we miss that sometimes. I don't think that we realize that there's a relationship between our walk with God, our belief in God, our honoring His Word, and what actually happens in our daily living. Where throughout God's Word, He presents this truth that God blesses those who honor Him and who honor His Word. I'll give you a couple of verses of Scripture that you can just take and write down, and you can look at them when you get home. One of those is 1 Samuel 2:30. It says this, God says in His Word, and those who honor me, I will honor. You hear that word? Those who honor me. This is a promise from God. I will honor. In other words, if someone chooses to be obedient to me, if someone chooses to put me in high esteem, if someone chooses to honor me and my word, here's the promise of God. I will honor them. If for no other reason that you came than to get that verse, that's a good promise. Amen? That's a good verse to hold on. Say, God, I just want to honor you so that you might be able to honor me. Another verse is 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9. When it says this, for the eyes of the Lord search to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is perfect towards him. Now, you need to grab hold of that verse and understand what it says. It doesn't say that God just by happenstance or accidentally might see you out there and bless you. That's not what it says. What it says is this, is that God's eyes are diligently searching like a searchlight throughout the earth. And in that searching, he is trying to find that person whose heart is perfect towards him. In other words, who chooses to honor him and to be obedient to his word. That the eyes of the Lord search to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong. That God would show up. That God would reveal his glory. That God would reveal his power. That he would show himself strong. What? On behalf of those whose heart is what? Is perfect towards God. In other words, if we can get our hearts completely towards God, if we're choosing to believe God and believe his word and dedicate our life to that, God says, I'm searching for you. I'm looking for you. The desire of my heart is to bless you. The desire of my heart is to show myself working in your behalf. I want to be involved in your life. I want to bless your life. I'm searching if you will have a perfect heart towards me. A perfect heart towards me. That's what this passage of Daniel is all about. It's an illustration of those principles. It's an illustration of a time and an experience in a man's life whenever he wants his heart to be perfect towards God. He wants to be obedient to God. He wants to be obedient to God's word. No matter the circumstances he faces, because he faces some really difficult challenges, difficult circumstances whereby he's going to be obedient. But he is choosing to be obedient, whereby God might bless him. God might bless him. Now, what do I hope that God does in our heart? I hope God does in your heart what God has done in my heart over the past few weeks as I've been meditating, praying, preparing for these messages. God grabbed hold of my heart. Lynn and I were talking about it. I said, you know, I don't want there to be one thing in my life that would hinder me from experiencing the blessings of God. I mean, if God just will show me that and reveal to me in his word that there's something that is hindering his work in my life, I want that to be gone. I want to be totally obedient to God. I want to be obedient to his word that I might be one of those that God can bless because I'm honoring him and honoring his word. That's a hunger in my heart. Now, if you don't get another thing out of it, it's blessed my life just to have that conviction in my heart. And I'm praying that you might have that conviction in your heart. I'm praying that God might grab hold of you and that you might be able to say in your spirit, God, I don't want there to be one thing. If there's anything I need to change, any conviction in my life that I need to move, Lord, anything that I need to take up doing that I'm not doing, not do that I am doing, God, whatever you reveal to me, I want to do that. I want to make that change in my life that your word can be true and your promise can be fulfilled in me, that God, you can bless me. No matter the circumstance of my life, you can bless me because I'm honoring you and I'm honoring your word. That's my prayer, that God will get hold of our heart. You know, a lot of times we make all kinds of excuses why in our day and time we can't be blessed. It's the world we live in. It hasn't got anything to do with the world you live in. I'm here to tell you, he had a far worse world than we live in, and God blesses him. God blesses him because he chooses to honor God. Let's talk about this passage and what happened in the life of Daniel. First of all, Daniel was powerless to prevent the deportation, to prevent that. Whenever they came in, Nebuchadnezzar, they came in and they held siege over Jerusalem, and the mighty army of Nebuchadnezzar picked out the choicest of the young men and carried them with him to Babylon. He was helpless to prevent that deportation. But whenever he gets over there in the deportation, a number of things began to happen. And he has to make some choices of what he's going to do and what God would have him to do. Now, you got to remember, I shared with you as we first introduced this, that Daniel and these three Hebrew children, young men, they grew up in a very special time. They grew up at a time when Josiah was king, and he had brought about a reformation and a revival of the people of God. They began to abide by the laws. They began to try to honor God and to put Him in the right place. Where there'd been a lot of wicked kings, Josiah had established a time of reformation. And these young men had grown up in the midst of that reformation. They had been taught the Word of God. They had been taught about the dietary laws that were established in the Word of God. They learned about what they should do as far as honoring God and worshiping Him and Him only and never bowing down to a false god. They had known and understood and grabbed hold of the Spirit of God and the Word of God under that righteous king, Josiah. So whenever they go over in that deportation, they couldn't keep from going over there, but whenever they go over there, they are well equipped for what they're about to face. And they are going to have to make some decisions, for some things are going to be pressed upon them. The first thing you see pressed upon them, it's found there in verse 5, is that whenever they came over there, it says the king was going to give them rations off of his table, his wine, his food, and he appointed them that they should be educated for 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter into the king's personal service. Daniel and his friends, along with other young men. Well, the first thing you see that happens, we'll talk about the food in just a minute, but the first thing you find that happens is that they're going to be educated by the teachers of Babylon. They're going to be educated about literature. They're going to be educated in science. They're going to be educated. Everything that they knew in Babylon, these young men were going to be trained. For 3 years, they're going to be trained and taught the things of Babylon. Well, you know what? Whenever that happens, Daniel does not, or none of the other Hebrew children prevent that from happening. They don't stop and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to study the heathen things. We're not going to study the ungodly things. We're not going to study the things. All we're going to study is the Bible. All we're going to study is the Torah. All we're going to understand. It didn't say that. But rather they were willing to study, listen, the heathen learnings of Babylon. You know why? Because they knew this to be true. That you can learn it, but you don't have to believe it. You can learn it, but you don't have to believe it. And therefore, it wasn't any hindrance to them, and it wasn't a conflict to them. They could learn all of those things that they needed to learn, but they knew that which was true, and they would hold that into their heart and into their life, and that which was not true, they would let go. I don't know about you. In my college experience, I had the same thing. I got taught a lot of things that I could write down on the test, and I could mimic it back to them, and I would get an A. Look here, I got an A. Look here, I got 4.0. I didn't believe half of that stuff. Because it didn't say I had to believe it. They just had to have to learn it, right? I had to learn it, tell back. There's a whole lot of things that were taught in college, and a lot of things that are not necessarily true that you might have to mimic. But somebody can teach you something. You can mimic it back. You can follow it back. But it doesn't have to make necessarily that you believe it. So it wasn't really a concern for him that he would not study it, because he didn't have to believe it one way or the other. He could just study it. He didn't stop. He didn't hinder that. He went ahead. Another thing that happened, I don't know if you noticed it or not, something else happened in verses 6 and 7. It names these Hebrew children, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But in verse number 7, what happens? The commander of the officials decides that he's going to what? He's going to what? Change their name. And matter of fact, he changes the 3 Hebrew children's name to the name that we know them best as. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, I don't know why we know them when we know Daniel with his Hebrew name. His name that Babylon had given him was Belteshazzar. Now, what happened in that? Did they just say, well, we want to change your name? No, there's a reason why they had their name changed. It was this, because each one of their names stood for and represented God. Every one of their names. Anytime that a name ended in E-L, E-L was another word for God. And anytime another word would end in I-A-H, It was a short form for Yah, or a short form for the word Yahweh. Yahweh. Every one of these men, their name represented their relationship with God. For instance, Daniel's name in Hebrew means God is my judge. God is my judge. Hananiah means Yahweh is to be gracious. Yahweh is to be gracious. Mishael means who is like our God? Who is like our God? And then Azariah means Yahweh has helped. Yahweh has helped. Well, every time that those names were called out, every time they mentioned their name, it was a reminder to them and anybody who knew that they were dedicated, set apart, and had a relationship with the God of the Jews. That God named Yahweh. Well, they didn't like that. They didn't like that in Babylon, so they changed their names. They changed Daniel's name to Belshazzar, which means Bel's prince. Bel's prince. They changed Hananiah's name to Shadrach, which means illumined by the sun god. Illumined by the sun god. Mishael's name was Meshach, which means who is like Venus. Who is like Venus. And changed Azariah's name to Abednego, which means servant of Nebo. Nebo or Nego, which is the son of Baal. The son of Baal. Changing their names to the heathen names, to the heathen gods, changed their name. But you know what? Even in that, Daniel did not resist. Daniel did not resist. Now when Daniel talks about himself and he talks about his friends, those three Hebrew children, at times he uses the name Daniel. At other times he'll use their Hebrew names, and at other times he might use their name given by Babylon. But they did not resist. Isn't that interesting? Why? Because they knew this, that they may change my name, but they cannot change my heart. They may change my name, but they cannot change my heart, and they cannot change my nature. It does not matter by what name you call me. What matters is who I am. And even though they changed their name, it didn't change that they were dedicated unto God, which all four of them in this book reveal that they are very dedicated to their God and will worship and serve Him only. Didn't fight against, didn't rise up against the education, didn't rise up against the change of name. But look what happens in verse number 8. But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. That's where the line was drawn. He knew what God's word said. He knew what God's prohibitions were. He knew about the dietary laws. He knew and he was not going to defile himself. Those words are so strong that it's much like when the Hebrew children said, you're going to bow down and worship this or you're going to be thrown in the fiery furnace. It's the same conviction of that, to the point that Daniel drew a line, and Daniel was saying in his heart, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to defile myself by eating of the king's portions or by drinking his wine. I will not defile myself. He drew the line. He drew the line on the food. He drew the line on the wine. Why did he do that? Well, because he wasn't going to defile himself. And he knew that the food was defiled. It was unclean to him. Let me tell you why the food, first of all, was unclean. The first reason was that Gentiles had prepared it. And when Gentiles prepared it, it was unclean no matter what it was. If a Gentile prepared that food, it was going to be considered unclean. A second thing is, I can almost assure you that off of Nebuchadnezzar's table, that Gentile, that heathen king, and all of their practices, there was food on that king's table that was prohibited in the Jewish dietary laws. There were foods there that the law said, you shall not partake of, you shall not partake of, you shall not partake of. And because that prohibited food was on that table, he would not and was not going to defile himself. The third reason, based on what it says in Exodus chapter 34, it says this. It says the food was defiled because the food that was offered at the king's table had already been offered to pagan gods. Before they ever brought it to the king's table, they would take it and they would offer it to a pagan god. And in Exodus, whenever God was talking to his children, he said, you are not to partake of any food that is offered to a pagan god. So because of the fact of the type of food it was and who it was prepared by, and the fact it was offered to a pagan god, it was unclean. Unclean. And Daniel says, I made up my mind that I would not partake of it. That I would not partake of it. Boy, that could cause you some trouble. That could cause you some difficulty. Wait a minute. That could even cause you your life. But he said, I will not partake of it. He also was not going to partake of the wine. Why? Well, you have to know about Jews. A devout Jew was to make certain always that they would never break the law of God. A devout Jew would never break the law of God. An example of that is that they were to never take the name of the Lord God in vain. You remember that? Never take the name of the Lord God in vain. The name of God was Yahweh. But you know what? A devout Jew would never say the name Yahweh. Never speak that name. Why? Because they thought in some way that they said it, in some inflection that they might make, that some way when they said that name that they would say it in vain and would be a sin against their God. So they never even spoke his name. If they ever said or were to say the name Yahweh, they would put the word Elohim in its place. Because the word Elohim meant Lord, but it was not the holy memorial name of God called Yahweh. So instead of saying Yahweh, when it said Yahweh, they would say Elohim or say nothing at all because they wanted to make sure that they did not sin against God. Well, a devout Jew considered that in the same way in regard to wine or strong drink. Wine or strong drink. There are prohibitions in the Word of God from partaking of wine and strong drink. I'll give a few of those to you so that you can read them when you get home. One of those is in Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 11. Another of those is Proverbs 20, verse 1. And a really good one is Proverbs 23, 29 through 32. A prohibition to let strong drink, intoxicated drink, alcoholic beverages affect your life. To not be under the influence of that in any way. Well, a devout Jew, you know what they would do? If anybody ever gave to them wine or they partook of wine, they would cut it. They'd cut it 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Some would cut it as much as 6 parts water to 1 part wine. Some would go as much as 10 parts of water to 1 part of wine. Why? Because they wanted to make absolutely sure they did not break that prohibition. Babylon's wine was not diluted at all. And what did he say? I will not partake of the wine from the king's table. All I ask is for water. All I ask is for water. He asked for 2 things. I want vegetables. The word there is not really vegetable. It means anything grown from the ground. It could be a vegetable. It could be a grain. But there was no prohibitions of anything that was grown out of the ground. So he knew that he was free to eat of any of the grains or any of the vegetables. That would not be anything unclean. And that he would partake of water. And he draws a line and he says, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to stand where I need to stand in relationship to walking a holy life before God. So what's going to happen to him? I mean, think about that. He's just one of a bunch of Jews. And if those Babylonians wanted to, all they'd do is just take him out there and hang him. Take him out there and cut his throat. Take him out. It's just one of many. If he's not going to do what we tell him to do, is that what happens? No. Listen to what takes place. Whether you realize or not, a miracle takes place. Verse 9. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. Do you hear that? Whenever he is obedient and he does what God says, God changes the heart of that commander over the officials. Actually causes that man to have compassion and favor towards Daniel. He sees in Daniel something special. He sees a sincerity in his heart. He sees a genuineness in his spirit to the point that he's not going to say, go take him out, but that he is actually empathetic to his position. Now, that commander's empathetic to his position, but he's not so much that he's under great conviction like Daniel. This is what he says to Daniel. I understand what you're saying. I can appreciate what you're saying, but here's the problem. I'm in charge of you, and if I give you that and you come up looking bad, and you look back compared to those other youth, and King finds out what I did, it's going to be my head, and I'm not willing to lose my head. In other words, Daniel had great conviction that official didn't have, even though he had favor, found favor. What was Daniel to do? Okay, forget it. No, Daniel didn't do that. Daniel goes in verse 11, it says, and he said to the overseer whom the commander had put over these four. He goes to another man who's the overseer, and he says, let me tell you what. He says, let's have a contest. Let's have a test. And here's the test. You simply take and feed all the rest, the king's portion, the king's wine, and you let us four partake of the vegetables and from the product from the ground and water. You let us do that. We will do it for 10 days. And after 10 days, then you judge and you find out who's better. Who's better? Well, I hope you understand, God's all over this. I mean, there's no rational reason in 10 days that somebody's eating vegetables and water is going to look better than somebody who's eating off the king's table. You understand that? There's no rationale about that at all. So how is it that these guys come up looking great? How do these guys look? It says fatter. It means healthier, because you know most of us are fatter, man. I would be a real positive force there, you know. If fat's what makes you successful, but it just means healthy. There's no rational reason except that God does it. Listen to what it says. It says, then let our appearance be observed. He said, I will do that for 10 days. Look at verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had eaten of the king's choice food. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine that they drank, and kept giving to them what he had asked for, vegetables and water. And what happens? And as for these four youths, it wasn't just their appearance that God blessed. Look what else he did. As for these four youth, the four youth what? Who were dedicated and who were not going to break God's law. Who wanted to honor God's law, even if it cost them their life. And these four, verse 17, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature. And not only knowledge and intelligence, he gave them wisdom, which is distinctly different from knowledge and intelligence. And Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. I'm going to tell you the rest of the book's about that. The rest of the book is about what he's able to see. Do you understand that God is going to reveal not only to Nebuchadnezzar things, he's going to reveal to Darius things, and he's going to reveal to all human nature, all mankind, what's going to be the end result of the ultimate things going to happen in the consummation of time. And who did he do it for? To somebody who was dedicated and said, I'm not going to break God's law. That is the blessing of God. Not only physical blessings, not only intellectual blessings and wisdom, but the ability to see and understand and comprehend dreams. And I'm here to tell you, whenever you get over here in this next chapter and you find out he doesn't only comprehend dreams, he can tell the dream that the king had and then tell him what it meant. That's pretty neat. I don't know about you. I don't know who's able to do that except somebody that God told. That's what Daniel said. Why did God tell him? Because he's dedicated unto God. Lord, I need that. Lord, I want that. If you're in school right now, if you're in college right now, I'm here to tell you, be dedicated unto God. You'll be smarter than anybody. You can be smarter than anybody, I promise you. Oh, Brother Mac, that's not true. You don't know that. Oh, yes, I do. I'm here to tell you, I made great grades when I went through school, and I'm not smarter than anybody. I just had an agreement with God. God, I'm going to study, and God, I'm going to honor you. God, I'm going to try to please you. And you got to help, God. You've got to help. Matter of fact, there's about 95% of the help as I need is on your side. I'm here to tell you, God can do it. I don't know about you, I've had dilemmas and situations in my life all over the place and not have any clue how to get the answer to that and only go to bed and say, dear God, you're going to have to help me know how to get that solved. I'm talking about some real serious, how am I going to get that solved? Only for God to reveal it to me. This is what you got to do to get that solved. Have you had that experience? I don't have that enough. I need a whole lot more of that. That's why I'm saying, God, please, let me get back to those times when you revealed to me, when you blessed that. Amen? Why would God do that for Daniel and those 4 Hebrew children? Because they were going to dedicate themselves to Him. Not only that, look, at the end of the 3 years, at the end of that period of time, they are brought in before Nebuchadnezzar. They bring him in before Nebuchadnezzar, and he talks to them, verse 19. And out of them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Not one was found like them. What's the difference in them? Why? Because they're dedicated unto God. Look what else it says. So they entered into the king's personal service. Who did the king want? The best. What opportunity do they have? The best opportunities. They're in there helping the king rule. Helping the king make decisions. Being the wise men who helped not only that king, but helped all of those Jews who had been deported over there into that Babylonian nation. But that's not all. Look. And as for every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, listen, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and all the conjurers who were in all his realm. They were 10 times smarter. Why? Only difference in them, they just dedicated to God. They're just totally committed to God. Not only in this, you'll find it in the rest of the book. They're totally committed to God. And God blesses them. Don't miss the last verse, verse 21. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. That might not mean anything to you right now, but it will mean something to you. You know who's king now? Nebuchadnezzar. You know who's going to be king after him? Belshazzar. You know who's going to be king after that? Darius. You know who's going to be king after that? Cyrus. You know what the length of time that tells you it is? It's from those 70 years from the first deportation till Cyrus comes in, who's the Medo-Persian king and who's the one who gives the decree that you can go back home. Nebuchadnezzar lives and dies. Belshazzar lives and dies. Darius lives and dies. And Cyrus comes in rulership. But Daniel continued. His influence continued. Even though different nations come into rulership and different kings are on the throne, Daniel's influence, Daniel's life, Daniel just continues. Let me tell you something. One of the greatest blessings you'll have in your life is when your life continues. Oh, I don't mean that you'll live forever on this earth, but you know what? If you'll live your life like you ought to, your life will continue through those you influence, through those you touch, through people who've known you. Your life will continue. And bless God, it'll continue forever, even beyond that. Amen? To heaven, to glory, your life will count. Your life will continue. What's the answer? Here's the answer. Do you want to be blessed by God? I mean, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes in our world today, this is what we're like. This is what we're like. This is just being honest. Okay, how much can I be like the world and still get to go to heaven? How much can I do and still be saved? How much can I get over there and look like Babylon and live like Babylon and still get to go to heaven? So that shouldn't be the question we're asking. The question we're asking is, dear God, what can I do to be more set apart? Dear God, what can I do to love you more, to honor you more, to be more obedient? God, what can I do to experience greater blessings of you in my life? That's the question you ask. And let me give you one last thing, we're finished, okay? He lived in Babylon. He lived in Babylon. You know that? Wasn't an easy way to have to live. But let me tell you something. Here's a little hint to you. We live in Babylon too. We live in Babylon too. Go read in the Revelation 17 and 18. You find out Babylon's still here, and Babylon gets worse till Babylon's finally destroyed. And in our society, we still have a Babylon. And it's still called on us to be a holy, godly, God-fearing, word-honoring child of God in the same world he lived in. I don't know about you. I'm signing up to be blessed. I'm signing up that, God, whatever you tell me, whatever you show me, Lord, we'll change that. We'll do whatever we need to do so we can experience your blessing. We can make a difference in the world in which we live. I hope you have that in your heart. Let's pray together.